that's actually one of the big reasons I wanted to run this introduction with you. Because every time we meet, I feel like we're existing on the extremes of everything, but we share a lot of common values, So driven by the same values, we think about things absolutely differently. And that's what makes it so interesting for me. Like every conversation with you sort of broadens my world a little bit. It broadens the number of perspectives from which I can look at things. Yeah. And today specifically, you will see why you're a guest on the first ever Human Limits podcast. I'm going to talk about how it started. There's 3 main parts, and you are mixed into all of them somehow. Yeah. So it all started a couple of years ago. I was finishing the Barcelona marathon. It was like kilometer 38. And I was done. I was like, not like tired, kind of done, but like actually done, like pain in the whole body. My mind, my body are screaming, please stop. Like there's no way we can go any further. And there's like 4 kilometers to go. So as I'm negotiating with my body to like shift into walking, which is normal, would be normal at that state. But I knew that it's my family somewhere around the corner cheering for me. And I decided like, okay, I'm just gonna run through them with all that's left in my body. And then I will switch to walk. So at the point when I reach the place where they are, my 6-year-old jumps on the track. He grabs my hand and we just ran. For the next 4 kilometers, there was no pain. There was no screaming body and mind. There was joy, tears, but the different kind of tears. And it was like one of my best marathon results after all. And it made me think, I was in the same body. It was like the same day, same race, same legs, same everything. And just by shifting my focus, I completely changed the way I do it. I completely changed the capacity I can run it. Next day, I couldn't stop thinking like, okay, it happened closer to the end of it. What if this shift would happen before? What if I could set myself up in a way that I don't need a shift, that I just run with a different focus? And I started getting ready for the next marathon by running much less, by doing much more yoga, mobility. I went to your class. And this is where we're getting to the second part of Human Limits Origins. Your mobility class here.
Was it the one in the small room where there was heaps of people?
Exactly. Yeah. I was wondering if you remember the day. It was like when I entered the room, it was full, but the people just kept coming. For the next 10 minutes, we had to rearrange mats a few times just to fit everyone in. And I was like, wow, there's definitely a demand for this. And another part was like, you were talking a lot. Like before we actually started moving, you were explaining in details like what's gonna happen to our bodies when we're gonna actually get to the exercise. And I remember myself like looking around, seeing people like fully immersed, like fully focused on everything you're saying. Then the same during like the exercises, like these rounds of cars. We didn't have music. It was like this silent class with like just painting, just like shoo, 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 shoo. And I thought like, wow, I wish way more people could be here. And then in the end, when it fully clicked for me, when you were explaining that not being flexible enough, it's actually your body protecting yourself. Just like during my marathon, my body was protecting myself from danger when it felt being in danger. Being inflexible means just like your body is taking care of you.
Totally. I mean, I think that defining moment of self-discovery where Gabby came to you and you realized that a limitation that was being imposed psychologically and physically evaporated was the embryonic moment where something, you realize that there is a limitation that maybe you spend your entire life being kind of restricted by, governed by, policed by, can be removed in a matter of moments through something that's not computational. It's like, it's not that automatically your body was flooded full of oxygen somehow, or that the lactic acid somehow removed itself from your body, but some shift, and I dare say it's a shift that is, elevatory in the sense that the love that you share with your son was able to reveal to you that there's a whole plateau available to you, and that kind of replicating that across time and learning how to do that is something that you became inspired to do. And that if you were trying to encapsulate human limits into it is to help other people realize that they can do the same thing. And so I remember when you said to me, like, do you like the name for human limits? And I was like, I love the name limits, because I think that we as people have this relational process to limitations, things that restrict us, and that we are constantly in an effort or a game to unlock what it is that allows us to go beyond those limits. And that when we do have those moments that we are able to transcend them, it's exhilarating. And then you are inspired to, let's say, go out and do something even more, limit pushing, or you realize that the moments that you'll remember on your last maybe moments of life and you're dying were those moments where those limits became removed, and it's beautiful to see that what you said, I think is perfect, is that it was Gabby that did it, because our connection to other humans in a loving way is, I dare say, the number one thing that if you were to take a grand scale questionnaire across all of humanity and say, like, why is it that you do the things that you do? And it's because I love my children, or I have this love for my partner, or my brother, my sister, auntie, uncle, even my pets, my cat, my dog, whatever it is, that we have this through the relationships that we have to others. We are inspired to push the limits of what we see as potential, and that we don't want to be governed by these limits. It's a motivating, whenever we have a loving connection to the world or whatever, it's the motivating force that enables us to do things where you have these last 4 kilometers of ecstasy, which could, if Gabby didn't come around the corner and join you in that last little effort, be an excruciating failure where you ended up walking or maybe not even finishing, and so that's the catalyst that you're trying to replicate with a human limits attempt, and I think that's really beautiful.
Yeah, and it also made me think, you mentioned now a few times about pushing the limits, but it made me think, do they really exist? Because like I was at my limit at that kilometer 38. Well, definitely, yeah. If you can't breathe, like what else can tell you you're at your limits? But then boom, they're not there. There is no, I'm unlimited again. Like I think if I had to run like 10 more kilometers, I would, So I would love with all this project explore not just like where they are, but also whether they do really exist. The last piece of the puzzle that made the whole thing complete for me and pointed me into the direction of where to take it was the podcast produced by WNYC which they advertised as uncluttered radio experience. And I was like, interesting. So they're one of the biggest, like they are unlimited in like what they can produce and the ways they can advertise, but they're choosing as their selling point on being uncluttered, So like, what does it tell us about the current state of the content market, be it video classes, be it like podcasting? It really became quite cluttered. Like, if not just by pure ads, there would be integrations, there would be something in between the lines. Yeah. So in order to get to the essence of the things, you would also have to consume a bit of the stuff you didn't subscribe for. You know what I'm talking about,
totally.
right?
Noise. I mean, I think, I always hear different numbers, but, the story is the same regardless of whether I'm accurate on the numbers or not. But it's like an average person in one day receives and downloads more information than what our grandparents did in their entire lives, and now you can argue about how much information we are getting or whatever, but it's quite clear that we're in an information surplus and that our nervous systems are maybe struggling, well, obviously struggling to accommodate that bombardment. And that the feeling that you're talking about, like uncluttered, is a moment where there isn't so much noise overloading the system, and the system is free to kind of take a breath and operate as it normally would. The same idea as a human being that, lives in a city, goes for a walk in the mountains, and then realizes, wow, they have revelations into their life just by taking a simple walk in the mountains. Like, where is that coming from? It's the same idea. Uncluttered, clear, spaciousness. And, the cinematic approach that you took to Human Limits is very much embodying that, because that's one of the things that people refer to most, is that when they take the class, it's kind of giving them that sense of like space for them to have a human experience, and that there isn't so much noise coming through the channels that they're trying to sort of sort out. And then after getting hit by all those layers of noise, then try to have this transcendental experience that you have through a practice of yoga or anything. So definitely a demand. As the information overload continues to ramp up, it's going to be more and more necessary for us to find moments that give us that feeling of emptiness or silence.
Yeah. You mentioned the cinematic approach, which at some point was like one of the main drivers of the project. It still is, but now retrospectively I look at it like as a tool helping us to deliver the classes, be it yoga classes, meditations, mobility, in more authentic way. So yeah, putting these three stories together, adding like market research on top, checking like what's out there, talking to you guys, I realized like there is a room for a product like this on the market that would be founded on three main pillars. So first being authenticity. It should be like from real teachers, things they want to say, things they want to teach, and things they're good at.
And I mean, I think it's also a sense that there's a hunger for authenticity. And, if I was to tell you, like, here, I'm going to teach you running, I would be pretending. I don't run, maybe I run to catch the bus if I'm late for whatever, but I don't find the enthusiasm that someone that runs has. And so if I was to try to inspire someone to run, I'd really struggle. It would be much more effective for them to go to someone that's like, you know what, I really love running, and there's 1,000 reasons why, because they're going to catch that infectious kind of authenticity or enthusiasm for the subject. And with anything, it's like curiosity and enthusiasm are going to be the driving forces behind someone developing themselves. And if that's not there and you're trying to replicate it artificially, we kind of have an internal radar that says, something doesn't feel right about this person's delivery on that. As a yoga teacher, it's like the things that I teach that I have lived come through so much cleaner when I try to communicate them versus the, maybe some of the more abstract ideas that I'm wrestling with, but I haven't been able to integrate and say manifest in my life. I haven't actually practiced this idea, or I haven't quite understood it as something that, so you can use it as like, when you go to a restaurant, maybe that has pictures of the food and you're looking at it and you're like, that looks really good. I might get it, but then different experience once you've eaten it. You can explore the flavors and communicate them. It's the same idea, you're hoping to maintain authenticity, and that's what will continue to attract people to the whole idea and concept. And that's fundamental. You can't escape that,
But having settled that, I know that you can explain to a runner what's going on in his or her body way better than another runner could explain.
It can be understood. Let's take boxing. It's a modality that I'm familiar with. You're always going to split your training into two different distinct parts. One is the skill in and of itself, which is the boxing, where you're working on timing, balance, etc. But then there is the physical conditioning part of it, and you want to separate those in such a way that it's not that you want to stay in the isolated space forever. You obviously need to integrate those two. The physical conditioning needs to come together with the skill at some point, but there is a certain benefit to separating them as modalities, so that for the first while you have this focus on physical conditioning, whether it's range of motion, cardiovascular, muscular strength, etc. It doesn't matter what it is, but you're focusing on that purely as the thing in and of itself. And it allows you to become, more evolved at that, so that then when it comes for the skill, and that foundation is already established. And so if you say, like your running is not going to fix a range of motion issue necessarily. However, the range of motion issue might be the thing that's obstructing the running. And so it's kind of like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Well, let's pull the two things apart first, work on them as individuals, and then see how we reintegrate them. And very often when you do, like working on a car, if you take your car to the mechanic, obviously you as the driver have the goal of the car driving you around cleanly. However, the mechanic's going to look at the things in isolation because that's what they're trained to do. It's a very similar way of approaching your running or any other discipline, is that there needs to be some specialized work in isolation very often to make sure that all the parts are putting together enough kind of functionality and effort to then allow the skill development that's on the other side of that to operate freely. Because if the skill development's being obstructed by something, operational in terms of the body, it's never going to allow a free-flowing kind of playful state for that skill development to really take hold. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and extending this metaphor of human body needing a mechanic, who would you say is a mechanic for a human body? It's like, is it a mobility teacher? Is it a yoga teacher? Is it a doctor at the hospital?
Okay, it's a brilliant question, because there's, one of the things that's problematic about, let's say, the Western approach to medicine is that it's very isolational in its approach. It's like problem, symptom, cure for let's treat the symptom, and you go to a liver specialist, you go to a kidney specialist, a heart specialist, etc. And it's very kind of one-dimensional in the sense that there's only isolation work being done there, so, and then it doesn't come back together into the completeness of it. However, if we look at a human being or any organism, really, nothing exists independent of everything else. So if you only ever treat things from an isolation perspective and you don't look at the whole, it's kind of like you have to have two distinct viewpoints. One is the holistic approach, where you see everything as a whole and how everything influences each other, which is almost it's unachievable to understand that mathematically. Like when they genetically modify food, if you change one genome, the cascade of consequences that goes down the line. It's very hard, and this is sort of the same thing with scientific studies. It's like, it's very hard to distinctly say that that one thing was the reason that that one thing happened, and that nothing else was affected by that. And so that's kind of like that's the argument towards the holistic model. However, if you don't have the ability to pause the system, isolate the misfunctioning hip, fix the hip, put it back on, and then see if the system runs better, well, then you can't really, the holistic approach it's more difficult to work in that range because one thing's always affecting the other.
Yeah.
So in order to be, a proper mechanic, you do need to be able to isolate, and I think that's what comes down. Your question is, who is that? It's that someone that has the understanding to see both, and that has understood how they fit together, and that can guide the person in saying, like, well, maybe try looking at the range of motion in your ankle before you go doing heavy barbell squats, because the compensations that will be kind of made around a misfunctioning ankle will be much more detrimental in the long run, because there'll be all sorts of stuff that will happen. So taking 10 minutes here and there to do your ankle warm-ups and do your little ankle exercises, then when you come to do the thing in and of itself, that everything works, and so that's like kind of why you have two distinct lanes of traffic when it comes to setting up a healthy, balanced relationship to any kind of complicated physical skill that you might be taking on.
So the short answer, who is the mechanic, is there's no mechanic.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's the short answer to who is the individual that's participating. And then they have the ability to seek guidance. And, that's where coaching is very, very good, because a well-skilled coach will be able to not only help that person see the areas that they might need to seek guidance in, but they'll be able to also help them to say, maybe you need to go and speak to this kind of person. And so we mentor each other in certain ways. And I'm a big advocate for the fact that if you don't have a teacher or a guiding force, you're going to have to go through the process entirely by yourself. And that's going to require lots of bumping into dead ends, lots of little niggles. Whereas if you go to someone that may have walked that path before, or optimally walked it many times with many different people, they're going to be able to streamline the process. And this is where, human beings, as they relate to each other, have an advantage, because we can communicate to each other. Hey, don't go down there because that's a bad place for this. Get the water from over there because it's cleaner, and thank you very much, and as we share information and help each other. And so, that's the necessity for teachers in this life. And I think the indigenous cultures get it right by the respect for the elders. The elders are being kind of protected by the tribes in order to enable that passing down of the wisdom. I can't even begin to mention how many times in my life I've been guided properly, fortunately, by someone who genuinely cared for me, and the benefit that's had has been far better than any kind of textbook or anything like that. So the mechanic is someone that has your best interest at heart, and that maybe, obviously if you're training for boxing, ideally they have boxing experience,
Yeah. I love that you're not trying to give a simple answer, that the answer is not go to yoga teacher, for instance, which would be a valid answer in many cases, right? But that was my short trip of discovery, because first I decided, okay, if not running, then what can balance out my body? Obviously yoga, right? It's all about the balance. I started paying more attention to this, just to discover that actually you need to do some mobility to have a proper yoga practice. But along with all that, building a proper muscles in your body is also something you should do separately. So it's like, it feels like there is a lot of components to that, and separately they're all great. But the balance is somewhere in between, correct?
Yeah, and I mean, say for example, you need better, you need stronger muscles or more flexibility or any of these, it's very hard to then stay in that isolation pathway and not include some of the wisdom that comes from the holistic dimension. Because if you're not sleeping well, you're not going to grow muscles. If you're not eating well, if you're constantly in a sympathetic tone in your nervous system, you're not onboarding nutrients. If you're not balanced across your entire life, progress is hindered, you know. So establishing a baseline level of health, where the body is in, let's say, homeostasis, where it's able to receive stress and then respond and make adaptation to that stress. If you're unable to kind of structure a life, and if you don't have the wisdom and knowledge necessary to do that, it's going to be very hard for any of the things that you want to make happen to manifest themselves, because training will then just become an additional stress on the body that won't enable you to recover from that. And it will put you in a place of burnout or fatigue. And so very often that some people have, you know, they come with a request of longer hamstrings in yoga, you know, and this is it's like, okay, we can stretch the life out of your hamstrings for months and years, and they may not go anywhere, because maybe we need to address the digestive system. So if you look at where the digestive system sits, it sits right down around the lumbar vertebrae, where your nerve endings are coming out that control the tone to your hamstring. And so if you're thinking of it like this, that the tone in the hamstrings is being affected because there's inflammation in the digestive system. And so if you don't address the inflammation in the digestive system, the tone in the hamstrings is never going to go down, because the body has a hierarchy of function that it's always going to prioritize organs over muscles, you know, and then the organs, they also stack up in a certain order as well. You know, you can use the metaphor of breathing. Your body will shut down every other function in your body in order to keep your heart and your lungs pumping. And that just comes down to pure necessity. You have 4 minutes without oxygen. So if that stops, your mind, your nervous system knows whatever it takes to get that back up and running, because it's the most important. Then you have things like the liver, the stomach, the kidneys, etc. That, you know, they're quite close to necessity. You know, you have a little longer without a functioning one, but not as long. Hamstrings, okay, great. Your body's not overly happy if your hamstrings aren't firing, but it will happily keep them tight if it means that it can send additional blood flow to your digestive system to aid in that process, because, you know, you'll live longer with a tight set of hamstrings than you will with a non-functioning digestive system. And very often that's kind of coming from the wisdom of the holistic domain, where someone that you need to understand your body as a holistic system that has hierarchies of function, and that sometimes if you are trying to isolate and target and you're not getting the results, and you think, you know, I've been training this for a long time, what's going on? Okay, let's look at some of the other factors. Is my baseline level of health at a certain level that allows me to repair and recover? Are my detoxification pathways running? You know, am I feeling generally energized throughout the day? Do I get dull or, you know, dizzy, or do I not sleep well? Having these relational processes that put you into an understanding of where you sit. And then usually if you prioritize those basic kind of fundamental principles, hydration is massive. Most people are walking around drastically dehydrated all the time. Nutrient density in the food, understanding what your body responds to well by what you eat, etc. Like all of those things, if you put those things in order for a given period of time, then a lot of the time some of those isolated issues that you're having that you might have been targeting will rectify themselves overnight, because all of a sudden there's blood flow available for the hamstrings, which then allows them to strengthen and lengthen and do whatever they need to do so that your forward fold can unlock. But if the digestive system is standing there as a blockage, it's going to be a long pathway, borderline impossible. You know?
It all sounds like you would need a second life to take care of the main life, you know. It's like taking care of your digestive system, like hydrating enough, like keeping all your body parts in check, and then working out, and then working on your mental health. And then somewhere in between the lines also like working 9 to 5 and taking care of your kids.
Totally.
That's, do you have an answer to this? Like, because this is what's stopping many, I believe, from like even starting on this.
100%. It's a very good question. Because if you look at everything I've just rambled through, it's like, wow, it's too much. And it is. It's too much for one person to go from there to there immediately. It's never going to happen. But say, for example, if 5 of the things that I just said kind of went off, start with 1 tomorrow. Hydration. Ask yourself a simple question. Do you know where your water comes from? If the answer is no, or it comes from the tap, or it comes from, some sort of place that you're not overly happy with, can you improve upon that a little bit? Can you do something, Doesn't have to be drastic, but can you improve the quality of water coming into your body? Can you make sure that you're drinking an adequate amount of water? Check when you go to the bathroom and you pee, what color is it? Is it clear more times than it's bright yellow? Can you make sure that that's taken care of over a few weeks?
You're making the just hydration sound like a big project.
Hydration is like, I couldn't stress.
But it's also important, right?
It's probably the easiest one to start with, that I think will kind of help, because that can serve as the motivating force. Because say, for example, you go, now that I'm hydrated, I have 10% less problems. That's interesting. It ignites a curiosity inside of you that goes, I wonder what else I could change that's quite easy, that's going to make a difference. And so then
the trick is not to jump onto solving all the problems at once, but rather like starting with like low-hanging fruits and building up the routine.
Small habitual change will result over the course of time in a dramatic change, and because this happens with yoga teachers all the time. They take our 300-hour yoga teacher training. Halfway through that, they call their boss and they say, I quit. I'm not coming back. I'm now a yoga teacher. And then they get back into the real world and they realize that a lot of the fundamental infrastructure that's going to enable them to be a functioning yoga teacher that's commercially viable to the point where they can sustain themselves is not in place in the slightest. And they realize they can't sustain this. They try for 3 months really desperately, and then everything collapses and they end up calling their boss back and saying, hey, do you reckon? And someone else has taken their job, and it's
the human limits pillars. The first was on authenticity and everything around it, and how cinematography is one of the keys to it. The second one is in the name, the human limits. Whatever we do, I'm trying to check. I'm trying to ask myself, like, is it getting anyone closer to understanding their limits, or bust a myth around the limits, or to really push them,
or exposing their artificial nature.
Exactly. So trying to stay as close to the ideas as possible in every aspect of what we're doing. And the third one is the focus, which is a big part of the first one, of the authenticity, like trying to keep things clear, but also directing your focus. That marathon lesson was about, what am I focusing in? Am I focusing on the problems I'm surrounded with? Am I focusing on the pain in my legs, on how hard everything is? Or am I focusing on the hand of a child I'm holding it in my hand? Am I focusing on the goals, on the dreams behind all this? Maybe I'm losing the focus for a moment, and I'm just floating, letting the life destiny wherever to take care of things. So that's another thing. Helping others in myself to focus on what's right. But first, exploring what is right.
I mean, I think that when you say, the focus point is all three pillars kind of sit together really well, is because there's a genuine need for authenticity. There's a genuine need for us to investigate our limits or lack of limits, our self-imposed limitations, and the ability for us to go beyond them, because that's what we were, conversing with earlier before we had about Gabby going beyond his limits, is how he progresses into more of his infinite potential gets manifest by him slowly going, oh, I can do that, I can do that, I can do that, and realizing that what he once thought he could do is actually artificial. And then the last one, when it comes down to focus, is it's like, what are we aiming at, as people? Because we're fundamentally navigational. We're in a body that navigates around what we focus on. It either moves towards things we like or away from things. And if we are conscious in the process of that and realize that if we aim at something more beneficial, if we elevate our fundamental axiom, what it is that we're paying attention to, we can elevate where we sit in life. We can move towards a higher purpose or good, and that slowly over, like say for example, you start by aiming at this thing because it's the highest possible good that you can conceive. As you start to move towards it, it's a little bit like the horizon, like it might have been there in the beginning, but it's going to get higher and higher as you get closer towards it, until maybe then it's also exposing that once you once had this level of understanding of that's as good as things can get, it's way higher than that. So then it slots back into the same concept of like what's happening with your limits. And then in order to do that properly, the authenticity part is fundamentally necessary, because if you can't be honest with yourself about what you're aiming at, then it's very difficult to actually go there. Because if you're having, a certain degree of deception that we're all capable of, and I think that we all deceive and perceive in a certain way that maybe renders things a little bit more in our favor. If you tell a story to a friend about something that happened on the street versus what actually happened, it's going to definitely be favored towards you looking a bit better or good, not being at fault for anything, etc. That's how we all work. But the level of authenticity comes in when the more honest we are with what it is that we're aiming at, the more realistic we are, the more established, okay, this is where I actually am, and this is what I'm been aiming at. Now this is what I want to be aiming at. And then we take, a direction based on that. And it serves a really good three sort of pillars as they work synergistically together to build the platform.
This is Human Limits, and today we have Mitch Burnett, a yoga teacher, mobility teacher, and my favorite answering machine to all fitness and self-improvement questions. Is it the best way to introduce you?
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah.
Introduce me.
Do you define yourself as a yoga teacher?
Yeah, well, yes, because that's the majority of my work and my personal investigation is along that road. Now, maybe one of the things that I have been adjusting recently is the broadening the term from yoga teacher to just someone that is attempting to adopt and attempt at living a very authentic spiritual life, and through my work as a yoga teacher, exposing people to, when they hear yoga, that's what yoga is actually referring to, because I think that's somewhere along the road we got a little bit disconnected to what yoga means, and that what exists out in the fabric of the universe or humanity is a confused understanding. So when people say yoga teacher, yes, I spend a lot of time working on sequences, postures, postural form, breathing, etc. That's a huge part of what my life is, but I would just want to make sure that anyone that hears the word yoga is taking a moment to make sure their definition is accurate. Because if you're thinking that that's what yoga is, unfortunately, with that understanding, you're missing 90% of the magic, that's going on there. So yes, I do refer to myself as that, but then I do try to take the time just to make sure that there is an adjustment made to the definition of what it means to most people. Because like anything, if something slips into a definition that's no longer serving, or it's no longer accurate, it's harmful. So it's just taking that time to make sure that we're careful with, even though I'm using this word, does it mean that to that person? It's very similar to like when you're teaching a class. I can say 1,000 things to do with your body, but whether or not it makes sense to that person in their body is a way bigger thing. So I guess that dialogue of making sure that when I am calling myself a yoga teacher or referring to myself in that way is just double checking, like, this is what I actually mean when I say that.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Big pleasure to have you here.
It's been a joy. Thank you very much.